This will be great. And you're not a physicist or a chemical engineer, right?
No, I'm an aerospace engineer.
That's awesome.
I think we're live. We're live.
We're live?
We are live.
All right.
Tell me how it sounds, people who are on Periscope, to make sure. Here's Vinny. Hey, Vinny.
Hi. On the phone with me is Trey. Trey, how you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Awesome. So Trey's going to ask or answer my question on batteries, hopefully. All right, here's my question, Trey. I've got, and for the sake of simplicity, we'll just kind of say we've got, I know this is not how they work, but we've got a battery, let's say a AA battery that has a positive cell and a negative cell, right?
Sure.
Okay, and if you connect the positive cell to the negative cell, it will short circuit and discharge, right?
Externally, yes.
So there is externally. So the negative differential, well, the electrons will flow from the negative side into the positive side because there is a voltage differential between the two cells, right?
Yeah.
Generally. Okay, so if I take those cells and rip them apart and connect them to each other, will they still discharge?
In what way would you connect them to each other?
So I would still connect the anode and the cathode, same way I did when they were together.
Right. So when you rip them apart, they're no longer communicating on them. So think of them like check valves.
Like what?
Like a check valve. Like everything has to flow in one direction. The electrons have to go in one direction.
Right. So they're going from the negative pole to the positive pole, right?
Right. And then they help the chemical reaction occur, but that chemical reaction still has to occur in the fluid that's inside the battery.
So is that different than the cathode and anode? Is that the electrolyte fluid?
Yeah, the electrolyte connects the anode and cathode together. That's where the chemical magic happens, I guess.
Okay, so that's the difference between connecting the anode and cathode of two separate batteries versus connecting the anode and cathode of the same battery. There's no electrolyte in two separate batteries?
Well, if you connected to the positive and negative side of the other part of the battery together, you would still complete the circuit.
If I connected...
It literally, I'm looking at your pictures here.
Yeah. Yeah.
The top left one, yes, that wire would start heating up.
Right.
And that would be done.
Right, the battery would discharge and you'd be done.
Right. The one to the right of that?
Yes. The ones that are in series.
So if you draw a line from the negative side of the bottom one up to the positive side, you might build up a tiny amount of charge on the negative end of that battery, just in a fraction of a second, but then it would stop. It doesn't have anywhere to go.
So that's the one to the right of it with the two whole batteries?
Yeah, the top right one.
Right, and that's basically like when you put batteries in series, like in a flashlight or something.
Yeah, except in a battery in series, it always connects back to the original.
Right, so I guess my biggest question here, the whole thing is like, so what is the difference between that positive and the negative on the two separate batteries that is causing it not to be a complete circuit versus the whole battery? Is it the electrolyte between the positive and negative, the anode and the cathode in the whole battery that makes, like you said, makes that magic happen?
Depending on the type of battery, there's an actual material resting in an acid. Let's say a lead acid battery.
Yeah.
Lead sitting in acid.
Right. So you got zinc. You have zinc sitting in. Right. So you have like zinc sitting in acid, right?
Yeah.
And the electrons will travel through the electrolyte to the other pole, right?
Right, and it'll build up a kind of film as it deposits onto the. I can't remember if it's anode or cathode.
Right, but it'll build up zinc oxide, which will slow down the reaction, right?
Yeah. So if that can't happen, once it's finished flowing, it just stops. It just can't flow. It seems to. I'm looking at your pictures, and I'm thinking I understand your problem, but you do know that. So the top right one, the short circuit, you have a question mark on.
Yeah.
If you drew a line between the remaining negative and positive.
Yeah, no, I get that. I understand that part.
Then it would short circuit.
Right.
That's the only time it gets short circuit.
I guess I just. Right. I guess what I don't understand is like what's happening internally inside the battery between the positive and negative that's completing a circuit in a whole battery that's not happening in two separate batteries.
So you could think of it as so the chemical reaction is taking place and it builds up an electrical potential on one side of the battery.
Right.
And then once it builds up the electrical potential, let's say 1.5 volts that
Right.
it's rated to,
Yeah.
the chemical process stops.
Right.
So until that energy can be discharged somewhere, it's done.
So how come that? Why isn't that discharging on the two separate batteries?
Because it's building up on the negative surface of the second battery.
Right. And how come
Nowhere to go
it doesn't go into the positive side of the other battery?
because it's not connected to it.
Oh, on the drawing on the right-hand side? I should have labeled these.
So it's a check valve. It can only flow one direction. It can't keep mixing together and just building up. It can only travel from the negative side to a positive side. And so electrical potential builds up on the negative side or the freestanding battery.
Right.
And it just doesn't go anywhere from there.
How come it doesn't travel through the wire into the positive side? Doesn't that positive side, isn't the differential still there? Doesn't it want to be more negative?
Yeah, so on the bottom battery, it builds up its potential and it travels into the positive side of that battery.
Right.
But then on the negative side of that battery is already at 1.5. It's stopping. There's nowhere for the energy to flow anymore.
So how come that doesn't happen on the complete battery? On the
Complete battery.
On the I should have labeled these 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's call the upper left one. How come that? What lets the potential difference continue on the whole single battery?
So energy is partially being dissipated by the wire.
So if I were to, so you're saying the wire makes the difference? Is it coming off in heat?
It would heat up a lot, but also it can only flow one way. It has to move in one direction. It has to move from negative to positive.
But I understand that. I guess like.
So once it builds up, so on the top right one, once it builds up in the second battery, it's done. You can't. The electrical process doesn't. It's built up 1.5 in the bottom battery. It's built up 1.5 in the top battery, and there's nowhere for it to dissipate. It slowly gives it up to the atmosphere, but.
And then, so what's making it dissipate? I mean, let's just say for the sake of argument, the one on the right with the two batteries is connected also by a wire from the negative terminal to the positive terminal. So what's happening in the one on the upper left that's letting it dissipate? You said it's losing it through the wire as heat. Wouldn't it lose it through the wire as heat also in the one on the upper right?
It would lose it, but it would only flow for, I think, like 1 millisecond. Like not even. Because it would build up power in the second battery and then it's done. Since it can't dissipate to the atmosphere very quickly, it's not really moving at all. The current's zero.
Yes, I'm still not seeing what the big difference is. Like if we were to separate, you see at the bottom, the one underneath that where you separate the cells? That doesn't work either?
In the bottom right?
Bottom right, yeah, where all the cells are now separated, right? And you've got a positive, negative, positive, negative.
So a positive and a negative can't just exist. If that was this is the difference between a battery and something that's just producing positive or negative voltage.
Right, I think I understand it's a potential difference, right? Like it's more positive or more negative?
Yeah, so if in your bottom right one, if that positive was changed to, let's say, a ground.
Yeah.
And then your negative one on the bottom right was changed to something that just shoots electrons out into space.
Right.
Okay.
Conceptually.
All right.
And then yes, that would flow all day long. But because it's actually an anode and cathode inside a battery that only works as a unit.
So that's right, they only work as a unit? They can't work separately, or they can't mix and match with other anodes and cathodes from similar batteries?
You can mix and match from other batteries.
But they have to be touching. They have to be touching as a unit.
Yeah, they have to be. They have to be together. It's not like trying to split a magnet. It's something different.
Like, are they holding inside the battery? Is there something holding hands that is allowing a free exchange?
Yes. Well, the whole thing is in that electrolyte soup.
And it has to be in there. And that's the biggest difference is that inside
So when you split it, either the electrolyte's pouring out onto the ground, or you're choosing a side for it to be on, but it's not connecting anymore.
So let's say I were to take, all right, so upper right again, the one with the two batteries, negatives connected to the positive of two separate batteries, right? If I were to take those and dip those in like lemon juice or something like that, or some electrolytic solution, then it'll flow?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I guess the answer to my question is, in a whole battery, in a single unit, between the anode and cathode, there's a mechanism that is connecting the anode and cathode within the battery, not through the poles, but within the battery, and that's the electrolyte solution that is causing quote-unquote chemistry to happen. And when you have two batteries in series, you do not have a completed circuit because there's nothing joining the anode and cathode outside of just the poles touching.
Well, there's nothing.
Is that close?
It's close. It has to. So the reason people were saying pump,
yeah,
is because the battery is trying to pump electrons out of its negative side. Right?
I get that. I mean, I know that, and they need to have a place to go. But like,
right. And so if you just have a pump and you put it on a table, that's what a battery is doing on its own, right? There's nothing at all. It's just sitting there, nowhere to go.
Right. It's like there's like a stopper in the pump.
Right. And when you connect it, even externally back to itself, the water or the electrons can move.
But they're moving into, let's say the negative side's a pump and the positive side's a bucket. Does that analogy work?
If the negative side, so if you had one bucket and then another bucket, okay, here.
Okay.
If you were trying to pump water from one bucket to another bucket.
I can't believe we're back to the pump.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's pretend for a moment, even in the battery, yes, this would work, but this is a super pump. This pump will pump it at the speed of light. But you will not see it happen for very long. The bucket's empty before you can even measure or detect it or anything. It's completely gone.
What scenario is that in?
This is the two pumps, two buckets?
So this is one pump, two buckets.
One pump, two buckets.
Be in the negative bucket.
Okay, and then as soon as you turn the pump on, the positive bucket's full.
Or vice versa, whichever way you want to think about it.
Okay, so that's happening in single...
That's on a single battery, just sitting by itself.
Okay, so now why isn't that happening on the two batteries connected in series?
It does, but as I said, the second you do that wire, all the bucket, or that negative end of that top battery is full. Done. Gone. Nothing. Everything's there already.
Wait, the negative end of the top battery, the one that's not connected to anything?
Yeah, the electrical charge is sitting there, ready to go somewhere.
Wait, how did it?
So it went from the bottom battery in this one. This becomes a whole. All that goes into the top battery.
Yeah, it's effectively one battery once you connect it by that.
So
one battery that's producing 3 volts instead of 1.5. We're talking about double A's, right?
Yeah. I understand the practical implementation. I've done that. I'm just not sure. So the negative side is going into the positive side. Now this positive side is more negative. But you're saying the negative side is also becoming affected on the top battery of that upper right one?
Yeah, it's ready to discharge 3 volts. But there's nowhere to discharge it to.
Right, but the bottom battery has not discharged its 1.5 volts?
It's added it to the top one.
Oh boy.
So the top battery can create a 1.5 volt differential.
Right.
You put in 1.5 volts, it's added it series to 3. So now sitting at that negative end is 3 volts, waiting to go somewhere. And that happens in milliseconds.
Right. So
there's no energy dissipation. I mean, It's all ready. The bottom battery's done producing electrical potential. The chemical process is paused.
Right, we've reached like an equilibrium.
Right.
But the top battery I get. So it okay. I think
The battery, it cannot communicate to itself internally past the fact that it just generates electrical potential on one end.
So if I were to, I could then still. So if let's just take that upper right one, right, where I've got negative attached to positive. If I then take a lead from the negative and attach it to the positive of itself on one of those batteries, if I short one of those batteries out, it's still just going to short out, right, without affecting the other battery.
It would short out the top battery. Oh, that's an interesting one. It might actually eventually short out the bottom one.
By just like through like the potential changing somehow?
Yeah, let's think about that. Oh. No. That's hard. Because that's one in parallel with itself and the other one in
series
trying to be in series.
Huh.
I'm sure there's an electrical engineer ready.
Yeah, I bet he's probably commenting furiously in Twitter.
And
all
in
right.
Periscope, yes.
So Trey, let me just say this. Let me see if I can sum this up again, just so I can walk away with this and feel a little better. When people kept saying, I understand you need a closed circuit, right? The closed circuit that is in the upper left, it is the positive. I keep forgetting. What's the positive? Is the anode the positive and the cathode is the negative?
Cats have paws.
Cats have paws, so that's positive. Cats have paws.
Cathode is positive. Yeah.
Okay.
I like that.
All right. So the cathode is connected to the anode, right? And the negative electrons are making the positive side more negative, and by doing that, it is becoming more positive, right? So they're reaching an equilibrium. And something inside the battery is completing the circuit, right? Something with the electrolyte is completing the circuit. Because when people kept saying it's a closed circuit, nobody would say why that's a closed circuit versus the two separate batteries, anode to cathode, is not a closed circuit.
So if you start at the positive end of a battery with a pencil and you draw it through the battery and then through any wires you've added, and then through the second battery, you need to be able to get back to where you started.
So inside the battery, there's like an imaginary connection happening between, like that wire's continuing through some conductive material or electrolyte?
Yes.
Okay.
There's an imaginary check valve that only allows flow in one direction.
Right. Okay. That's the part I think that nobody was answering for me. Like, what's going on inside that battery that is that's completing this circuit that's not happening when you try to hook up two separate batteries, and that's that there's that imaginary or theoretical or possibly real check valve happening that is not happening with two separate batteries.
When a battery is a self-contained unit, you need to have an external connection from one side to the other.
But there's also some kind of internal thing happening.
Batteries work. Yeah, the battery works. Electricity does need a closed circuit, and if it flows, that means there is a connection somewhere.
Right. Okay.
So, inside the battery, there is definitely a connection.
So this is probably be a lot better to understand with a dry cell battery, where you have two plates in acid on one battery, two plates in acid on another battery, and if you do the anode and cathode of two separate batteries, obviously there's no liquid touching, and the electrons can't flow. Right. So that's probably. I think that's where my biggest misunderstanding was happening. That inside the battery, there's still an electrolytic solution that is causing a flow of electrons. Right. Even though the flow of electrons is happening through the wire, something is still happening inside the battery to complete that circuit.
Yes. I'm struggling to say yes. Perfect.
Hey, yeah, no, I know. I know it's not that easy.
Battery is different because the electrolyte is what allows the anode and cathode to produce electricity.
Right. No, I'm trying to just simplify it for myself to basically understand why this works. So basically what happened last night, I was just reading a book on, as I do, on how batteries discharge or whatever, and, was looking at the chemical equation of, I think it was zinc and magnesium oxide in the battery or something, and basically the exchange of oxygen causing this and that and this other thing, but didn't see a chemical exchange between the walls in the electrolytic solution, right? So I was curious to see, well, what's going on inside the battery on a self-contained level versus what's happening with just a positive and negative on two separate batteries. That was my question. Maybe the thing I was looking at just didn't find it necessary to add that information. Because there is a waste product also inside the battery as these things share electrons, right?
Yes.
And that has to get stored, obviously, somewhere.
Right. It gets stored on the one of them. Either the cathode or the anode.
Right. And then
the anode or cathode. It's broken down onto it.
Right. And then in the case of the car battery, then it's just the zinc oxide, right?
Well, they put a sufficient amount of nickel or something in it that allows it to when charged off.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay. Huh. All right. I think
Someone's talking to themselves, but that's close enough.
I think that answers. Austin, how do you feel
I think
about
so.
that?
I think that's right.
On a battery that is a whole unit, inside the battery, there's something going on, and I don't want to break this for myself again, but inside the battery, there's something going on that is not happening. There's a transfer or a chemical process that allows the circuit to complete that is not happening in two disparate anodes and cathodes that are just sitting there wired at the poles. There's nothing happening. You have to sandwich it together and put that electrolyte in to make a full circuit that completes, and that's the full circuit.
Right.
And that's how the pumps can work.
Think of the battery, instead of worrying about what's inside it at all, a battery on one end creates a negative potential and on the other side creates a positive potential.
Right, but I guess
that's what the anode and cathode in the electrolytic solution create. It just creates an environment in which one side is negative and the other side is more positive.
Right, but without that electrolytic solution, that process can't happen, right?
Right.
Right, so that's what's missing.
Well, I'm sure there's a battery out there that doesn't need that solution. It's probably metals layered directly on top of each other, but they need to communicate in some way. Yeah.
Is that a dielectric battery?
I don't know.
Okay.
You're asking the wrong person.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, I'm going to just nod my head.
All right. I think that's going to do it. You know what? I'll come up with some awesome other dumb questions the rest of the week, and we'll just turn it into a series.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks so much for
have an engineer on call. Give me a little heads up.
Okay. Do you work with planes?
Yeah, I work for Cessna.
Oh wow. Okay. So when we go flying, I'm going to ask you how planes work next time. I don't get it. What's lift? All right.
Thanks so much,
Trey. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye, Internet.
I feel like that was the question. What is completing that circuit inside the battery?
It's something inside the battery.
There's
Juice.
stuff happening. There's stuff happening inside the battery that I've got two things now. One that either is a catalyst to enable those reactions to happen to create the differential, which creates the pressure for the voltage to happen, or let's go with that.
Let's go with that.
And without that, in a vacuum in space,
that would not do anything.
Those
loose. There wouldn't
in this very particular AA battery. And I know the cells don't look like this. I know that it's actually like a barrel and surrounded by it and stuff. But anyway, I don't know. That's fun.
That was fun.
Yeah, that's fun. Sorry if everybody's frustrated or watching, but thanks again to Trey for taking the time. He was very patient. Thanks to everybody else who helped out. That is probably not how batteries work.
I'm terrified to look at my tuner.
All right, bye.
Bye. I can't. This isn't.
It's okay.
There we go.